The Narey and the Hairyman. One day, the strong west wind came in over the ocean and blew a small traveller into the garden. She had beautiful long hair that sparkled like the sand on a summer's day. She was wearing a shiny golden dress and had fine gossamer wings that beat fiercely as she battled the breeze. The wind was determined to keep her from going any further, so eventually she gave up and, being tired, decided to make her bed in the heart of a rose. She slept through the night. In the morning, a motley assortment of bugs and garden creatures gathered around her flower to see what the wind had blown into their home. Eventually they started talking about what kind of creature she might be. "She's a brownie," said the lady beetle. "No, she's not," said the caterpillar. "Brownies are brown and green." "She's not brown and green." "Do you think she's a sunbeam?" asked one young cicada. "She's just so beautiful." "No," said the aphid, "she's not a sunbeam. Sunbeams are sparkly. She's kind of yellow and just glows. I think she's a fairy." Everyone agreed that the aphid was right and loudly agreed together, "She's a fairy." The noise startled the little traveller, who woke with a start, pushed the hair out of her face and said, "What?" "Please, miss," said the aphid, trying to be polite, "are you a fairy?" The traveller frowned for a minute. It was hard to think so early in the morning without a cup of coffee in her hand. She then said, "No, I'm a Narey." "Well, she really is a rarey," said the cicada with a grin. "I don't think she's scary at all," said the lady beetle. Cicadas and lady beetles are notoriously hard of hearing. "No, no," said the traveller, still a little grumpy first thing in the morning. "I am not a rarey. I am definitely not scary. I'm a Narey. A Narey." "Oh," they all exclaimed. Then, after a pause, "What do Nareys do?" "Well, they draw and paint. They look pretty. They make people feel special, and they teach them how to make the world a better place." "I look pretty already," said the lady beetle. "I'd like to feel special," said the aphid. "I'd like to make the world a better place," said a small, scruffy dung beetle. "Maybe you could stay and teach us," they all said together. "Let me think about it," said the Narey. She looked around. It was very pretty there in the garden. It had everything she needed. She thought she could be very happy living in the heart of a rose. Besides, it was a long time since she'd really been needed. "All right," she said, "I'll stay." Everybody cheered. "That's great, Miss Narey," said the little aphid, and the name stuck. From then, all over the garden, she was known as Miss Narey. Time passed. The flowers grew more beautiful, caterpillars grew fatter, and everyone lived in harmony. Then one day, another stranger entered the garden. He was dark and hairy. He had a kind of restless energy and couldn't stop building things. When it was dark and he thought no one was looking, he'd stamp his feet, roll his eyes, and poke out his tongue and make terrible noises. It was a terrifying little ritual. This frightened some of the garden folk, and they ran to get Miss Narey. "Miss Narey, Miss Narey, you must come and see. We think it's a troll." "What makes you think it's a troll?" said Miss Narey. "Well, it's dark and hairy and waves its arms around making scary noises. We think it wants to eat us." Miss Narey was quite partial to dark and hairy, so she thought she'd go with them and take a look. "That's not a troll, she said with a smile. I've seen this kind of creature before. That's a cheeky fella. They look kind of scary, and they like a joke and to wind you up, but they're mostly harmless. They're really quite nice once you get to know them. Go and say hello. Once again, the brave little aphid took the lead. Hello, sir, he said with a shaky voice. Are you a cheeky fella? You can call me anything you like, he said in his oddly accented voice, as long as dinner is on time and there's plenty of the appetite for after. So it was that the cheeky fella was christened Hairyman and given a home among the other creatures in the garden. He'd been passing by the garden on his way from one adventure to another when he spied Miss Narey through a gap in the hedge. Having nowhere better to go and nowhere better to be, he decided to enter the garden and see what would happen there. Time passed, and Miss Narey and the Hairyman fell in love. He began to build them a beautiful home in the shadow of a wood fungus on a fallen tree branch. One interesting fact about the Hairyman was that he could work late into the night after the sun went down on account of his glowing nose. He had spent too long near a uranium mine up north, and one day after a particularly bad thunderstorm, he found that his nose had started glowing. He didn't mind, it wasn't particularly noticeable during the day, and it made a nice conversation piece at parties in the evening. Eventually, after the longest time, they married. Miss Narey left the heart of her rose to live in the fine new house that Hairyman had built. He liked to make her feel special and considered a life with her an adventure worth having. Everyone was very happy. During those days, the major topic of dinner conversation was whether the happy couple's girls would look like Miss Narey and the boys like Hairyman. I hope so, said the caterpillar. Can you imagine girls with faces that hairy? I don't think the world is ready for scary, hairy Nareys. The end. Yes, if you think the person who wrote this story doesn't know what he's talking about, you're wrong. His name is Grub.